the last ESC I want to show is called ESC8. Okay, it says there's no one, but let's just take a look. Do we have Edge here? Okay, so in essence, ESC8 is when the certificate authority has something called web enrollment enabled. And this is a bit fun because as soon as you install it, you are vulnerable. And yeah, and how do you install it? Well, you just go into the server manager, you click install web enrollment. And the reason is that you can do NTLM relay to the HTTP endpoint. And the purpose of web enrollment is, of course, maybe you don't have, if you have a MacBook in your company, you still want to give them certificates, but they don't support all the Microsoft protocols necessarily. So you can allow them to enroll via HTTP. Let's see. Doesn't look that good. Maybe it is.
So just installing this, the directory gets vulnerable and people can risk. And this is not considered a vulnerability for Windows. This is just a feature. Is that right?
Yeah, that is how Microsoft sees it. Microsoft sees it as the NTLM relay is the vulnerability, and environments, organizations should protect themselves. That is their responsibility. Microsoft just says, here's HTTP. HTTP is vulnerable for relay in different ways that SMB is vulnerable, and that is to do with the SMB signing and so on,
Okay.
and the protocol signing. So it is installed. I'm a bit curious why we didn't. Oh, okay. It loaded in the meantime. So yeah, it's basically just this web interface where we can request certificates. We saw how we used Certify to do it, and you can do different stuff. And of course, as an attacker, if we can get NTLM relay, and for those who might not be familiar with NTLM relay, it's basically us as an attacker. We trick someone into authenticating to us, or maybe they do it by accident, and we take their authentication and relay it. We send it to something else. So if someone tries to open a file on our server, they will send their credentials in a hashed form, not the NTLM hash, but it will use challenge response. So we will challenge them, they will send a response. So it's not the same way we can use it, but we can just connect to what service we want. Let's say it's SMB for simplicity, another file share. So they connect to us, we connect to the SMB share. The SMB says, okay, here's a challenge. Please encrypt that challenge with your NTLM hash. And we say the exact same to the victim. Hey, here's the challenge. Please encrypt it. It sends back the response. We send it back. So we're just man in the middling this whole authentication. But for SMB, there are some rules about when can you relay to what protocols can you relay and so on. So SMB, for instance, SMB to SMB in most modern environments, that will not work because it has something called signing, SMB signing, where you, for each packet you send, you also have the integrity verified. So we as a man in the middle cannot spoof that integrity. But for HTTP, it doesn't support all these signing requirements. It's just a very basic protocol. So if someone tries to open a file at our server, well, we can connect to the web enrollment, HTTP. We can forward the credentials to that one and the challenge response. The victim will not know. They will just say, oh, we failed to open the file. But now we got an authenticated session against the HTTP server. So we can enroll a certificate based on that user, that victim. So how do we even get someone to authenticate to us in the first place? Well, there are something called Coerced, which is a tool that collects a lot of different techniques, and it just tries to exploit each of these techniques. And basically, it's different Microsoft protocols that maybe I have an opinion that maybe Microsoft should fix them. They have a different opinion. But basically, you are authenticating to a server as a regular user, and you say, hey, can you please open this file over here? And it says, yeah, okay, let me just use my server account to open that file, not the user account. So Coerced has implemented a lot of different techniques. You might have heard of Petit Potam or the print spooler block. But these are just, there are different ones, and Coerced will do a lot of them. So let's exploit ESC08. So Certify has a command called relay, and it will take a CA, and this will be the DNS name of that. And we should run as a sudo. And now it's just listening. It's waiting for someone to connect. And as soon as someone will connect, it will target that server. So who will we target? Well, we want to go for the domain controller. If we can make the domain controller authenticate to Certify's relay, we can get a certificate for the domain controller. So we can impersonate the domain controller. Now, the domain controller is not allowed to enroll in all certificate templates. There is a specific one called domain controller authentication. There should also be just one, domain controller, where the domain controller is allowed to enroll. And that is because the domain controller is part of a group called domain controllers, whereas regular computers are a member of domain computers. So it's two different groups, and they decided to separate it into two different templates as well. So we want to target this template. So let's specify the template domain controller. So now it's listening. Now Certify knows that, okay, I should request this certificate template. So let's open up another Kali and just say proxy chains. Let me see if I already have a command. Okay, we will create it. So yeah, I already installed Coerced. I think it's like this.
Can you make that screen bigger?
Yes, definitely. Okay, so they have some different commands. Scan, coerce. Coerce is this fancy word for actually triggering the whole process of making it. You kind of force it to authenticate to somewhere. So we will do that. Now there used to be a slight moment. I think it was last year, when one of these vulnerabilities, one of these coercion techniques, sorry, could be done unauthenticated. So you didn't even need a domain account to do this. Some of you might have heard of something called Petit Potam. It still works, but now you need to have a domain user. But before that, just if you had network access, you could trick the domain controller or any other server into authenticating somewhere. So just by having network access, and if ADCS web enrollment was installed, well, it's game over for the environment then. But now we need an account for doing that. So we will use our, it's a bit, okay, let's see what other options. Okay, oh yeah, we should specify course.
Can you
Let's
make it
see.
just a bit bigger? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, better. Perfect.
Okay, so then we should specify a target IP. We will go for the domain controller, and we should also specify a listener IP. So where should it try to connect? And as I mentioned in the beginning, I did some weird port forwarding. So I will just get this is basically, I didn't get it. I don't know why it's actually so strange. So this is basically the IP of our Kali or our Windows host, but I forwarded port 445. So what we'll do is say the target is it's the domain controller. We can do the full path. And we are listening on this IP. So hopefully when Coerced is running, at some point, one of the techniques should work. The domain controller will try to authenticate to our relay listener, and hopefully that should relay the whole connection to web enrollment. So let's just try to run it. It will first say, I tried this technique, do you want to continue? Well, we didn't get any output, so we will continue. Now it's trying. I really hope I did the port forwarding. It doesn't look like it.
No, it doesn't look like it.
Nope. But let's see. Next time. Let's just try to continue then. Well, I'll try to debug it. Let's start over. Yep, so this can take a bit of time trying to get it to work. It doesn't look so good. I also tested this right before. But every time I reboot, okay, that's why, sorry. Yeah, every time I reboot, I get a new IP.
Mm.
Let me see if I got the right IP. I know this should be right. No, it's a bit weird. Let's just for fun see if we can. Oh, what? Oh, okay. Wow, nice. So apparently the screen didn't update, so everything was running. That's why it was so weird. Okay, let's try to run it. And this time, let's hope that the terminal will update. We will run the coercer again,
Mm-hmm.
and we will continue. Okay, there we
Okay.
go.
Yeah.
So now the connection came into relay, and it basically just used that authentication to connect to the HTTP and enroll on behalf of the domain controller. So now we got a certificate as the domain controller. So what can we use that for? Let's try to get the hash first. So let's do partially chains certify off. Let's call dc.pfx. Okay, just as before, we try to authenticate with the certificate. We get the hash. So now we have the hash of the domain controller account. So as mentioned before, the computer accounts are also like a user account. So what can we do with that one? Let's try, for instance, connecting to the SMB share. Can you hear the noises when I tap
No, no, no.
complete?
I don't hear
Okay,
any
great.
noises.
Okay, cool. So this is just another package script where we can connect to a file share. So let's try to connect to the domain controller itself. And we will specify the hash as before. Yeah. So we connected, which means the hash is correct. If we try to list the shares, we have admin, $, and some domain controller specific ones. If we try to open the $, we will get an access denied. And that is because the domain controller, just because it is its own server, it doesn't mean it have administrative permissions over itself. But it is a domain controller account. So what can that account even be used for? If we look in Bloodhound, sorry, and we try to see what can it be used for, it has a special permission called DC sync. So maybe some of you have heard about this before. It's basically, if you imagine you have multiple domain controllers in a domain, they all need to be synchronized. So there's this whole DC sync where one domain controller can ask another one, hey, do you have any updates for me? Maybe a user changed his password. I want it also. And we will exploit exactly that. We will pretend that we are the domain controller. And what is funny is that even though we're the only domain controller, we can ask ourselves in this protocol, is there any updates? So we will do that. So even though we could not connect, we have something else called secret stump from Impact again. It has some different arguments, and there's something called just DC user or just DC. If you specify just DC, it will dump all the password hashes. If you specify just a single one, it will be a single username. So let's just take this one and then just say secrets dump. Let's just try just DC. And we get all the password hashes in different formats. We get the administrator and so on. And with that, again, we can connect with the evil WinRM. So that was ESC8. You usually can coerce other domain servers and computers to authenticate to you, but not necessarily users. You cannot force them to do it necessarily. So that's why we target the domain controller instead of the administrator.